You know that feeling? You're part of some big project at work. A new software rollout, a new process, a whole reorg. And it looks fantastic on paper. But then it just kind of fizzles out, right? Well, today we're going to break down a really clear, actionable framework for handling the people side of all that and hopefully turn that potential chaos into some actual controlled results. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to dig into why these big changes fail so often. Then, I'll show you a surprisingly simple formula for getting it right. After that, it's all about the how-to, a 5-phase roadmap, who the key players are, and finally, how to make sure the change actually sticks around. So, first up, failure. Because let's be honest, when a major project goes sideways, it's not just about the money. The real cost is in the lost time, the tanked morale, and all that squandered momentum. I want you to just think about this for a second. When a huge initiative totally goes off the rails, what's the usual suspect? Is it the budget? The technology? The timeline? What do you think? Yeah, it's almost never the technology. The number one reason projects fall flat is because we completely forget to manage the human side of the equation. We build the most perfect, elegant solution, but we don't build any acceptance for it. And you know, the really frustrating part? These failure points are almost always predictable. We see the same things over and over. Leaders who aren't really on board, a clash with the company culture, a vague idea of where we're even going. But here's the good news. If these problems aren't predictable, that means they're also preventable. So if this people problem is the biggest roadblock, how do we get around it? Well, that brings us to a really elegant, simple formula that cuts through all the complexity. Here it is, R equals Q times AS. So, results equals the quality of the solution multiplied by the acceptance of the solution. And that little multiplication sign is everything. Think about it. If you have a 10 out of 10 perfect quality solution, but you have zero acceptance from the people who actually have to use it, what are your results? Yep, zero. A big fat zero. It's a super powerful way to remember where we need to focus our energy. This really just gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Managing the people side isn't some fluffy, nice-to-have skill. It's a critical multiplier. Without acceptance, the most brilliant strategy or the fanciest tech is, for all intents and purposes, completely worthless. Okay, so how do we systematically build that acceptance? That brings us right to our third section, a practical step-by-step roadmap that can guide you from the very beginning to the very end. This 5-phase process is really the engine that makes acceptance happen. It follows a really clear logic, right? You can't start if you don't first identify where you are and where you want to go. Then you prepare for that journey by figuring out who might push back. That lets you plan around those risks before you implement the solution. And finally, and this is key, you have to sustain it to make sure all that effort wasn't for nothing. And here's a little dose of reality that any good change process has to acknowledge. There is almost always a temporary dip in performance as people are learning new ways of doing things. It's called the transition dip. A managed process doesn't ignore this or pretend it won't happen. It expects it and it plans for it. Okay, so we've got our formula, we've got our roadmap. Now let's talk about the people. Section 4 is all about breaking down the 3 critical roles that have to exist for any of this to work. Success really hinges on 3 groups, and they each have a very distinct job. You can think of the leaders as the sponsors, right? They give the project the green light and the resources it needs. The change team, they're like the architects, the engineers. They're designing the plan to navigate all the challenges. And then, maybe most importantly, you have the affected groups, the people on the ground who have to ultimately choose to adopt this new way of working. And this is absolutely critical, so I have to spell it out. Leaders can't delegate leadership. A leader can't just hand off their duties to the change team and walk away. The leader must be the one who is visibly leading, communicating, and committing resources. The change team helps. They facilitate. They build the communication plan, but the leader has to be the one to deliver the key messages. That distinction is everything. All right, we're at our final section. And honestly, this might be the most important one of all. You've done all this hard work, you've survived the transition dip, so how do you make absolutely sure you don't just slide back into all the old habits? See, the goal isn't just to get to the desired state. The real win is making that new state the new normal, the everyday reality, the new current state. You know you're done when the old way of doing things isn't just discouraged, it's not even really an option anymore. So, how do you lock it all in? Well, a few things are just non-negotiable. You have to have a designated process owner. Without someone clearly responsible, things will just drift. And you also have to formally close the project and recognize the team. This sends a clear signal that the hard work is done and it was a success, which builds positive energy for the next time a big change comes along. So let's just wrap up with this thought. Change is always happening, right? Your next big project is probably already on the horizon. The real question isn't if it's coming, but whether you're setting it up not just to launch, but to actually last. And by focusing on acceptance, following a clear process, and making sure everyone knows their role, you can give it a real fighting chance.